Hello, geometry students. Here's your lesson for section 3-1, Lines and Angles, with Missy McCarthy, a math instructor at Okemos High School. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to say, I can identify parallel, perpendicular, and skew lines. I can interpret the meaning of the symbols for parallel and perpendicular lines. I can identify pairs of angles formed by two lines and a transversal, and then I've listed the pairs of angles corresponding, same side interior, alternate exterior. And I can identify the transversal and classify pairs of angles from a given diagram. So let's take a look at what we're doing. First, we're going to address that first I can statement. I can identify parallel, perpendicular, and skew lines. So if you look at this three-dimensional diagram here, we are going to identify parallel lines, which are coplanar lines that do not intersect, by putting little red arrows on the lines. So if you look here at line EF and line AB, and you see those red arrows, that means that these are two coplanar lines that do not intersect. And we would write AB is parallel to EF, just as they have here next to the definition of parallel lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect to form a 90-degree angle. So if we were to look here and here, we see there's a right angle mark in the corner. So those two lines, because they intersect to form a right angle, would be considered perpendicular lines. We also see here that line AB is perpendicular to line AE. Okay, wherever that right angle mark. If there's not a right angle mark, you cannot assume that they're perpendicular. And lastly, we have this thing called skew lines. Skew lines are not coplanar. They're non-coplanar, and they're not parallel, but they don't intersect. Examples of skew lines would be like this one here. Now I need a line that's not parallel to it, but that's not in the same plane as that one, and they will not intersect. So this one here. So those two would be examples of skew lines in that three-dimensional image. And then lastly, we have parallel planes. Those are just planes that don't intersect. So if this was a perfect cube and we were looking at this face of the cube, this front face of the cube, and then we decided to look at the back face of the cube, those two would be parallel planes. So just a few definitions. So we're going to quickly identify pairs of parallel segments or parallel lines, skew segments or lines, and perpendicular segments and parallel planes. So I'm just going to do this fairly quickly. I'm looking right here for my arrows. I see arrows here and here. So I am going to say segment PS is parallel to segment RQ. So that's my answer for 1A. Pair of skew segments. So this is my answer for 1A. 1B, a pair of skew segments. I am going to say segment LM, and that's right here, and segment NS. Segment NS are skew. There's no symbol for skew. All right, for 1C, a pair of perpendicular segments. Let me look for my right angle mark. I see it right here in the corner, and that would be segment NS is perpendicular to segment SR. There are other options, but that's the one that I chose. And then lastly, parallel planes. Remember that we name planes with three letters. So I am going to say it appears as if plane RQL and plane, oops, I could have written the word plane, plane RQL and plane SPK, that's on the back side there, are parallel. There you have it. All right, so when we talk about having lines and angles and things intersecting, we need to know how the diagram is laid out. So if we have a line R here and a line S here, in between line R and S, that's what we're going to refer to as the interior. And then outside, the top here and the bottom here in this case, that's what we're referring to as the exterior. Okay, so any of these angles, 3, 4, 5, and 6 lie in the interior of lines R and S, and then 1 and 2 and 7 and 8 lie on the exterior. Now, along with that, we also have this line called the transversal. And a transversal is just a line that intersects two coplanar lines at two different points. So it intersects that line there and that line there, intersects them at two different points, so that makes it a transversal. And whenever you have two lines in a transversal, 8 different angles are formed, and you can see those 8 angles formed here in the diagram. So one of the kinds of pairs of angles that are formed are corresponding angles. And corresponding angles lie on the same side of the transversal and on the same sides of lines R and S. So for example, angle 1 and angle 5, those would be corresponding angles. They're on the same side of our transversal T, and they're both, for lack of a better word, north of lines R and S. 1 is north of line R, and 5 is north of line S. Other corresponding angles would be 2 and 6, 3 and 7, 4 and 8. So those are a pair of corresponding angles. Alternate interior angles are non-adjacent angles that lie on opposite sides of the transversal, and they are between the lines, so they are on the interior of the lines, and they alternate. They're on opposite sides of the transversal. So an example would be 3 and 6 for alternate interior angles. Alternate exterior angles alternate, but they're on the exterior, so they're on alternate sides of the transversal, but they're on the exterior, so like 1 and 8 or 2 and 7. And then same side interior, they're on the same side of the transversal, and they're on the interior of the two lines. So like 3 and 5 are a pair of same side interior angles, and also 4 and 6 are a pair of same side interior angles. All right, so let's quickly try to identify in this example here some corresponding angles, some alternate interior angles, exterior, alternate exterior, and same side interior. I'd encourage you to pause the video at this moment and try to identify the lines and then see what I say. Okay, so a pair of corresponding angles. I am going to choose, in this case, angles 2 and angle 6. Those are corresponding angles. You could have also said 1 and 5, 4 and 8, or 3 and 7. Alternate interior angles. They alternate on different sides of the transversal, and they're on the interior. So I'm going to say angles 4 and 6 are alternate interior angles. You could have also said angles 3 and 5. Alternate exterior, on opposite sides of the transversal, and on the exterior, I'm going to say angles 2 and 8. You could have also said angles 1 and 7. And same side interior, I'm going to say angles 3 and angle 6. They're on the same side of the transversal and they're on the interior, but you could also say 4 and 5. All right, this one's a little bit more difficult. They're going to give us the angles and we have to tell what they are and what the transversal is. And the reason this is more difficult is because we have several lines intersecting here. So let's first take a look at angles 1 and 3. Angle 1 is right here and angle 3 is right here. They're on the same side of one of these lines. They're on the same side of line L. That's the line that those two angles both have in common. So L is my transversal. L is the transversal. Now I have to decide what they are. They're on the same side, so they're not any of the alternate angles. This one, angle 1, is to the west of line N, and angle 3 is to the west of line M. So because they have that same positioning and they're on the same side of the transversal, they are actually corresponding angles. Okay, so that's the first one. All right, now let's identify angles 2 and 6. So we've got angle 2 here and angle 6 right here. Well, the line that they have in common is line N. So line N is my transversal. Okay, so let's look at their positioning. They're on alternate sides of line N, so they're alternate something. Now I have to just decide whether they're exterior or interior. And because this, if I were to have my line L here and my line M here, the exterior would be out here somewhere or up here somewhere. So they are alternate interior angles. Alrighty, last pair. I'm going to keep 6 circled because we're going to look at 4 and 6. Angles 4 and 6, all right, they have line M in common. So M is the transversal. M is the transversal. And lastly, they are not on the interior. The interior would be in here. They are on the exterior, so they are alternate exterior angles. Alrighty, now you should be able to identify parallel, perpendicular, and skew lines. Use those symbols correctly for parallel and perpendicular. Identify the different kinds of angle pairs if you're given a diagram, and also identify the transversal and classify pairs of angles. We will work on this more in class. See you then.